I think as far as my specific situation goes in terms of student government, leadership and service, I think compassion's the biggest theme, compassion and sort of empathy. I don't know if I emphasize this enough, but it's, needless to say that the pandemic was a very, very difficult time for everyone, right? This was a worldwide phenomenon of incredible loss in so many ways. Of course, the loss of life, the loss of livelihood, and our community was not immune from either of those. And the loss of personal connection, the loss of touch with things and people that we hold dear.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Meet Princeton, a podcast to introduce prospective students and their families to Princeton University, brought to you from the Office of Admission at Princeton. My name is Vivian Slee, and I'm a Senior Assistant Dean in the Office of Admission, and I'm so happy that you've tuned in to join us to hear from current student voices and others about our community and about what it's like to be a student at Princeton just now. I'm sitting here with my wonderful co-host, Bryant Blunt, who is Assistant Dean of Undergraduate Students and Manager of Strategic Communications for the Office of the Dean of Undergraduate Students. And in addition to all of his other many responsibilities in his role, he also interviewed our guest student for this episode, USG President Christian Potter. So, Bryant, can you tell us a little bit about how you came to know Christian?
Sure, Vivian. Christian, as everyone will learn, is the latest Undergraduate Student Government president. Christian was elected, actually, though, during our time away from campus. But before that, he was very active as well in student government. And so I met him through some of the other initiatives that he was a part of, largely the USG Academics Committee, of which he was chair. So that's really my earliest sort of time meeting Christian, working with him on some pretty important, high-profile student initiatives that he helped lead, and his leadership style stood out. His sort of maturity and skill in approaching issues was, again, a really remarkable one, and I think he's been a great leader.
I was just completely blown away by his maturity. He had this incredible wide scope and perspective, talking about centering empathy in all they do in their policy work, talking about all the stakeholders in the community and so on. I thought it was a little unusual, for a student, for somebody so young to be thinking about all of these things.
On one hand, I agree. I think it is always sort of remarkable and refreshing, but it's a great reminder, too, of the many talents, skills of our Princeton students to take on these things in ways that we would probably define as wise beyond their years, but also, I think, just really brave and it's so difficult in the COVID time to characterize it, but
I hear what you're saying.
A really appropriate approach.
Yeah. He talked about service being work and leadership is work. I love that quote. He talked also about being a PAA. Can you tell our listeners, for those who might not know that acronym, what that means?
Sure. So a PAA is sort of a peer academic advisor, and you may hear throughout our series, there are many, many opportunities for Princeton students to help support their fellow students. Peer education is a really important feature, I think, and characteristic of our undergraduate system, and another set of voice, a sort of trained bridge from students to their academic interests and academic resources.
So if I were a new student at Princeton, would I be assigned a PAA? How would I find out, who would be my PAA?
A great question. So it's actually the opposite way, in that PAAs are sort of assigned to support Z groups. So as a new student, you'll be assigned to a advisee group. You'll have a residential college advisor, an RCA, and PAAs work closely with RCAs to really reach those Z groups. So from the student perspective, I think it's a good way to be introduced to these resources in a sort of a smaller unit, right? You more personalized, more tailored, and alongside people that you come to know and trust and meet in other ways. You have this shared journey of, well, here we are exploring our interests and learning about them at Princeton in our early years.
You talked a lot about mentorship being ingrained at Princeton and how it happens organically.
Yeah, I think mentorship, advising, and to a certain extent, these are the same concept by different names.
I think that's a really good point. And it also makes me think about him and the way he spoke about the faculty perspective.
Well, I know he'll, again, talk about a number of things, one of them being his academic interests in policy and in I think, government. And it's also a talent, I think, that's underrated in today's sort of system of governance, right? Is knowing that there are others, right? That it's not just win, lose, that there has to be discussion, consideration, careful consideration, and appreciation for all perspectives, or as many perspectives as are reasonably possible, and then to account for them in proposing solutions that most people feel supported by. And I think he gets that intuitively in certain respects. He certainly gets it on our campus and in ways where, faculty at times have different interests from students, but what is our shared goal? I think that's the other thing that he really also keeps sight of, our shared goal.
Right.
And, and is able to sort of, where for many other people, there might be ego. He's, I think, interested in sort of, again, the shared success of the group.
Very well said. I think that's what really struck me. And I'm looking forward to our listeners being able to hear from him. So would you like to introduce him?
Christian Potter, our guest today, is a senior from the Washington, D.C. area, concentrating in the School of Public and International Affairs. He is a peer academic advisor in Maddie College, a member of the club tennis team, and an undergraduate fellow of the Center for International Security Studies. Christian also serves as the president of the Undergraduate Student Government.
I concentrate in the School of Public and International Affairs, the undergraduate program of the Princeton SPIA. It's a really wonderful curriculum that allows you to explore pretty widely across various departments. It's the most interdisciplinary concentration in the school. So that's politics, economics, psychology, history, sociology, and you can explore all those disciplines and lots of different policy areas. I mostly focus on sort of domestic economic policy and the political implications thereof, but have explored plenty of policy areas through the SPIA. It's a wonderful program. Apart from sort of the main courses that I've taken in SPIA, I've been basically interested in European history. We have a really iconic history course on the Soviet Union with Steve Kotkin as a phenomenal course for me. And I also love to dabble in the humanities. One of my favorite courses that I've taken at Princeton was actually a religion course on Jesus and early Christianity. It was wonderfully sort of humanistic. You'll be in a precept or a seminar with students from lots of different concentrations, and you can kind of pick up on what they're bringing to the table, and they really lead into that. And so, I think for me, the interdisciplinary nature of my concentration definitely bears on the other courses that I take, and also vice versa. USG is the undergraduate student government here at Princeton. It's composed of basically two halves. One is the class government, and the class government is representatives of each class that are really focused on programming and community building that's geared toward strengthening the individual class. And then the other side of USG, which is the side that I'm on, is the USG Senate, which is more focused on questions of university policy that tend to affect the entire undergraduate body. I'm the president of the Senate, and our election cycles occur at different times throughout the year. So the class government, other than for the first years, they have their elections in the late spring. And then the vast majority of positions on the Senate hold their elections in the late fall, early winter. I actually joined USG in the fall of my freshman year, right, sort of getting onto campus. I joined as a member of the academics committee, which is one of our standing committees, one of our core committees of the USG Senate side of things. But it's a committee that you sort of apply to. You don't run for office. And I felt that was a really great way for me to get involved because I was new and I didn't know anything about the institution. And I thought that, I could simultaneously learn a lot about this institution sort of, gradually and sort of in a concerted way, but also bring my perspectives as a first year. And then in the fall of my sophomore year, again, that sort of election cycle, I ran to actually chair that committee. We had just come off the calendar reform on that committee to move, among other things, to move the fall term final exams before winter break, which was a really exciting development. We'd worked on securing more OPT visa options for international students, which was really impactful. And only after a few weeks, the coronavirus struck and we were all shifted off campus very, very quickly and suddenly and unexpectedly. And I recall my predecessor as chair, a really excellent friend of mine, Olivia Ott. She sort of sat me down once I had taken over her position and she said, you ran on a platform, you had a lot of ideas, and you come in with all of those ideas and you really want to, hit the ground running and try to implement them. But I guarantee you that something's going to happen. It always does, where, there's an unexpected event and your agenda kind of gets swept up in it. And a lot is going to have to change. And a lot of the ideas that you wanted to implement are going to have to be subordinated to, some novel concerns. And for me, it wound up being the coronavirus that occupied the agendas of virtually every administrator, right? And, sort of by implication, then it occupied the USG's agenda. So as academics chair, that's exactly sort of the situation that I came in faced with. I think one of the interesting things that we realized pretty quickly is that once we were all off campus and learning virtually and remotely, academics was one of the few things that really actually tied us together as students at Princeton. Of course, a lot of extracurricular groups continued to meet virtually and improvise in really creative and innovative ways. But we really were connected by academics more than anything else, because we couldn't just walk around and share social spaces together and bump into each other and sort of have impromptu social interactions. And so academics really came to the fore. And one of the biggest issues that came up wound up being grading, because it was very difficult to know, again, from both perspectives, the student perspective and the faculty perspective, how evaluation should occur. All these resources that are at our disposal here at Princeton, you just walk into the Writing Center, right? You just walk into the McGraw Center for Teaching and Learning, for tutoring help, these things like this. Again, a lot of them transferred online, but the resources definitely were a challenge to sort of live without immediately. And also students faced very different circumstances when they went home, depending on their backgrounds and their sort of home circumstances. And then from the faculty perspective, it's, how do you interpret that? I talked to plenty of faculty members as well as students. Of course, the undergraduate student government represents students, but I think it's always important to talk to all the stakeholders in the community. And, faculty members were concerned as well about how they were going to be teaching, because they went home to, vastly disparate circumstances as well. It was a very challenging issue internally to the committee in USG, working with administrators, seeing what other schools were doing. There were lots and lots of components to the issue. But I think it was a very important issue, and it was very formative for me, honestly, in my experience in student government. Other than being involved in USG, I'm also a peer academic advisor in Maddie College. And so I actually got to move in about a week before most of the upperclassmen student body when the first years were here. And so the first years were here, they moved into their dorms, they were in their Z group, their advisee groups. They were participating in the modified outdoor action and community action and dialogue and difference in action orientation programs. And they were really based here on campus, which was actually a little different from previous years where they're mostly sort of doing off-campus orientation programs. And it was a really lively campus. And then, the rest of campus moved back, the juniors, the sophomores, juniors, and the seniors. Again, I think there's this tremendous appreciation for the little things. I think just sort of the spontaneous conversations, the detours you take in your day that are unanticipated and may derail your studying for a few hours, but that really are just meaningful and that we haven't been able to do for a while, and therefore become higher priorities, I think, than they were before. I know for USG, that's been really exciting for us to just have our meeting spaces again and sort of see one another face to face. I think especially for a group that's dedicated to elevating issues and hopefully addressing issues that arise in the student body, it's very important that we're in person and sort of face to face, because again, just to sort of reincorporate these notions of compassion and empathy, these are issues that really require both of them, as I think we learned more than ever from the pandemic. And it's just easier and more natural to remind ourselves of the compassion and empathy that are required when we're face to face and in person. And of course, it just makes it a more enjoyable experience, right? I think, USG can be a workload, as a lot of things on campus are. It's work, service is work, and leadership is work. And I think it's just all the more fun, and you kind of forget that it's work when you're in person and sort of enjoying it with your peers. As I sort of alluded to, I've been blessed to have really strong mentors in the classes of 2019, 2020, and 2021. And I certainly am not alone in that experience. One of the most special things about Princeton is that mentorship really happens organically through the residential colleges, through these student organizations, through academic settings. All of my close friends and colleagues on USG and elsewhere all really have relied on mentors to kind of get to where we are, to conceive of our roles on student government or our roles as Princeton students. And I think, again, we all sort of see that as an imperative, I think, going forward. It's why I wanted to be a peer academic advisor. And I think mentorship will continue to be sort of the part of the backbone of the student experience here at Princeton, again, despite these disruptions, and perhaps even more so because of these disruptions. Another really exciting initiative that we've been developing is this Tigers in Town program, where we are partnering with local businesses and a lot of them restaurants, but also other establishments to provide free food items or other items for students to really get into the town and kind of experience it, conceive of a Princeton community that includes the town of Princeton and the wonderful community members there. Also to support the local businesses that, did have a rough time during the pandemic, especially last semester. That was a key motivation. And sort of to promote a more equitable experience in terms of experiencing Nassau Street and experiencing the town of Princeton. We do hope that winds up becoming a more sustainable and long-term community dining partnership between students and establishments off campus. Also, for the first time, we're actually holding a semester internship program with partners in town. So in this sort of same vein of connecting with community partners, our campus and community affairs chair has spearheaded an initiative to place students at nonprofits and government institutions in the area during the term, which is a really exciting development at USG. I think it tries to embody sort of the spirit of service that we engage with, that plenty of students engage with, most students engage with in all of their pursuits, in ways that are pretty novel around Princeton in the sense of an internship during the term. We're also just excited to be resuming a lot of our regular programming and events. So for example, Lawn Parties is coming up. That's a large concert and event that we hold in the fall and in the spring. We have not been able to have a traditional lawn parties for, of course, the duration of the pandemic. That's several semesters. And so we're really excited to be holding that event with the headliner act, with a student opener, with all the food trucks. And of course, the various eating clubs will also be hosting their own events throughout the day as well. So we're really excited to be resuming that programming. And then we have a lot of task forces that are pursuing sort of new areas of policy and doing sort of the groundwork for policy that we hope to affect this semester, but also that will last beyond our semester, or I should say beyond the end of my term as USG president. So we're always looking at the disability experience on campus. We're looking at actually the transfer experience on campus for the first time with our new transfer experience task force. Again, we're always looking at community dining, sustainability, pretty much every issue we're engaging with and working with the relevant administrators on. I think one of the most exciting things about USG and Princeton in general is that we're all leaders in many different ways. Princeton offers no shortage of opportunities to be a leader across different aspects of campus life. And so on USG, I am the president of the organization, but I'm working alongside leaders. And I think sort of finding ways to just channel their own leadership is more my mission than anything else.
Welcome to the Mailbag, the place where prospective students' questions are answered live on each episode. This week, Chris from Paris writes, "Our family has good savings and may not qualify for very much need-based aid at an elite university, but with top test scores and grades, might get a merit scholarship to another school. If a student in this situation did get accepted to an Ivy League school, could you talk about why the financial cost would be worth it?" Thanks for this question, Chris. While I can't speak on behalf of any other institution, I can say that you as a student are in the driver's seat, and in terms of your education, you get to decide how much you will embrace the opportunities of wherever you are, even before you get to university, what you contribute to your community, and so on. In general, we can tell you that Princeton has made a commitment to access and affordability, and that our admission is need blind. This means that if offered admission, Princeton will meet 100% of your demonstrated financial need with grant aid. Our financial aid program is one of the most generous in the country, and we determine a family's ability to pay using our own need formula with fair and generous individual results. To sum it up, we can't tell you whether the cost of an education, regardless of the institution, is worth it. Only you and your family can make that decision. Thanks, Chris, for the question. We hope listeners might send us more questions to the Mailbag for future episodes. Mailbag. We hope you enjoyed listening to this episode of Meet Princeton. As I said earlier, this podcast was created with prospective students and their families in mind. And so with that, I'd like to direct all of our listeners to our admission website at admission.princeton.edu. There you can watch, read, engage virtually, and learn more about Princeton University. Meet Princeton's audio engineer is Nick Dinoli of Orange Box Pictures. Mary Buckley and I, Vivian Slee, are producers. Bryant Blunt is our co-host and consultant, and original music was composed by Molly Truman from the class of 2024. We'd also like to give a special thanks to Christian Potter, our student guest, for his fantastic contribution to this episode. And a big thank you, especially to our listeners for tuning in. We hope you'll join us next time on Meet Princeton. Immigration, policing, climate change. How will we tackle today's most pressing global issues? If you enjoyed listening to Meet Princeton and would like to learn more about the student experience at Princeton, check out Tiger Prince, a podcast series that dives into critical issues through the work of students at the School of Public and International Affairs. This limited series features recent graduates who uncover the findings of their senior research projects, known at Princeton as the required undergraduate thesis. After 4 years at Princeton, these students are prepared to take the next step in their careers, with their thesis serving as the foundation. You can listen and subscribe to Tiger Prince from any podcast app. Tiger Prince, tomorrow's leaders, tackling today's problems.